Greetings, and we're back again. Yes, you don't touch that dial. You got the right show. My name is Senator James Sanders Jr., and our podcast is called Let's Be Clear. In a day and age of fuzzy thinking, in a day and age where you can't get a straight answer to a straight question, we're going to cut through these things. We're going to try to get to the crux of a thing, to the gist of a thing, to figure out where are we going, and can we change our trajectory if we don't like where we're going. And I would suggest that today's subject is a subject that we need to change the trajectory. We need to change the whole narrative of this thing. We are talking about hate crimes, not your quote unquote typical hate crimes or an upsurge in the typical hate crimes. This part of the reported hate crime community has in days gone by been underreported, but now, my friends, we are, my God, we every day we seem to be hearing about hate crimes aimed at the Asian community, and we've got to delve into that. And I'm glad that I have two people who really, right now, and then we'll get more people who could really get into this, including the man who wrote the book on this whole business, and we'll get to him. And we have the head of the Flushing Chamber of Commerce with us, and we're going to have the officer who is in charge of the Asian anti-Asian hate crime task force, and we will close with, of course, the ubiquitous Senator John Liu, who will join us later. Ubiquitous and well, if I only knew what the word meant, I'd say that he was all over the place. So having said those things, President Wu, good that you're here. I'd rather be discussing Queens College, but let's discuss in your 2-minute history of anti-Asian violence. Is this a new phenomenon? Did it just happen? Or is there some history of this? And if you had put your book into the chat, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator, so much for having me here. I'm humbled and honored. Actually, higher education is one of the ways that we can address all these issues. And our campuses are places that are so diverse, we bring people together. So this is very much of concern to all of our students, your constituents. The awareness is new, the issues aren't. You know, there was a time when Asian immigrants were lynched in places such as Los Angeles, when it was a frontier town in 1871, Rock Springs, Wyoming. Most people don't know that history, but the awareness is new. I can't remember another time in my lifetime, I'm 54 this year, I can't remember another time when anyone's talked about these issues the way that we have. But with the COVID-19 pandemic and the toxic environment, people shouting racial slurs that I remember well, the common cruelty of childhood, bullying, and saying, go back to where you came from, or this is all your fault. We've seen a pattern. It's not random, it's racial. We know that from who we see being attacked in these viral videos. And it's not just name calling. That's how it starts. But it leads to spit on, shoved to the ground so hard they break bones, kicked in the head, sent to the hospital in a coma, stabbed, and shot. There's just so much now that we've seen, culminating in those terrible murders. 8 people killed, 6 of them Asian women. So gender is a part of this too. They were singled out. It wasn't just the population at random. And the killer, a white man, well, he confessed. He confessed to this, and yet even after that, there were people who wanted to dismiss the idea that it was a hate crime. They wanted to deny that there was anything wrong at all. You know, the police officer investigating that case said after the perpetrator said he'd done it, police officer said, he was having a bad day. I saw that. I thought, that's got to be fake news. But then it turned out that cop himself had been spreading that China virus meme on social media. So it's no surprise. You know, look, at the end of the day, can I look into someone's heart and say, This person's a bigot through and through. Do I know that they're racist? I don't know if technically it's a hate crime, but I'll tell you what, the effect is racial. It's a specific community that's being traumatized, and it's wrong. Asian immigrants, Asian Americans, they're native born children and grandchildren. They're not asking for special treatment. They just want to be able to walk down the street. That's all. Just to be treated like any other American, like any other immigrant. So this isn't new, but thank you so much to you for bringing attention to this important issue.
Well, you're more than welcome. The history of blacks and Asians really needs to go back, and we need to speak of this. Yes, there has been some tension, as there must be with human beings. Yes, there can be disagreement, but we have to learn, of course, to disagree without becoming disagreeable. And that is what I have done with my friend John Choe on occasion. I cannot think of a disagreeable point that we have had, but he may know many. He may say, "Oh my God, Sanders, we have so many on you." But I will say this, my friend John, what? How did we get here? How did this nation get to this place, sir?
So first of all, thank you, Senator Sanders, for your leadership in bringing us together and for spotlighting these really critical issues that we must have a dialogue around. Um, I would say that I have a slight disagreement with President Wu in the sense that um, when he says Asian Americans just want to be treated like other Americans, um, I don't know if other Americans have been treated that well either. If you look
Mm,
at indigenous Americans,
well,
Latinx people, African Americans,
mm,
women, there has been a history of systemic discrimination and racism that is the basis of this white supremacist
No, no.
society. And so I hope that we can get beyond normalizing these types of behaviors and attitudes and the way we treat people to not say this is what America is about, this is just the way things are in this country. I think we can be better than this. And actually, I started out in my career when then Councilwoman Julia Harrison in 1996 told the New York Times that the Asian immigrants moving into her district, which is in Flushing, were robbers and thieves and that were coming to conquer and invade the neighborhood. And I was extremely upset. Many people organized rallies and demonstrations, but she was endorsed by the Queens Democratic County machine and she got reelected. And that at that point, I worked with my friend John Liu. We both went to Binghamton University, and I helped elect the first Asian American elected official in New York. And I'm very proud of that fact. And we were able to achieve a lot in terms of changing around the political landscape in New York, from a point where we're being scapegoated by our own elected official to now where any ambitious politician will hire Asian Americans, will visit Flushing, will ask us, what do you want from me as a mayor or a comptroller or public advocate? So I think we've come a long way since 1996, but we have a lot more to go.
I was around in '96, and I remember that woman, and I'm so grateful that she was tossed out. On behalf of President Wu, I will accept your friendly amendment. I think that that's the best way to describe it, where 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 his thinking was common. I even fell into the deceptive thinking. However, you were so clear and quick to point out that we must have to that higher level, and that's what the president, I believe, was trying to say: a higher level, which usually is white. Hard to get around that one.
Right.
But let me not speak for you, Mr. Wu. I'm putting words in your mouth, and That's why you're the president and I am not.
It's why you're a senator. Thank you. You did that so gracefully. You know, we were all watching that trial for the murder of Mr. George Floyd. And my father, who came to this country in the early 1960s, so he's in his mid 80s, and you know, like a lot of fathers and sons, we don't talk about that much, but he'd been watching too, and he wanted to tell me. I visited him, and he said, you know, he said it was wrong. He said that's ridiculous what they did, and so my father, as an Asian immigrant, saw the suffering, the killing, captured by a heroic citizen journalist. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known, because the police report would have just said that guy was resisting arrest, no weapons were used, and you know, he just happened to die. But that verdict gave relief. Now, I know it doesn't fix things, and we really had to struggle to have the right tone. It was, well, certainly better than if it come out the other way, but that was just one verdict, and there's so much more for us to do, and we're now going to be watching. I know I'm going to be watching this trial for the murder. Just terrible. Someone hunted down Ahmaud Arbery, just jogging. And so, to John's point, your point is absolutely well taken, and I accept the friendly amendment, because African Americans, when they walk down the street, they're at risk of being of being killed, or being followed, or people shunning them, thinking they're a mugger or purse snatcher, and they endure on a daily basis all of this. And to have sympathy, to understand, hey, you know, if Asian Americans talk about this, we got to see African Americans. Boy, no one wants to compare suffering, but African Americans, I would say there's no contest. The sorts of, you can be bird watching in Central Park like Mr. Cooper. Now, if you're going to stereotype someone, I would say, hey, bird watchers are probably a pretty peaceful, friendly bunch of folks, right? And you can have someone call 911 and say you're threatening to commit acts of violence, and it's just absurd. So when we see that, it's so important for us to be good allies and to know there's a common cause here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will agree with you on this common cause idea, and just to reflect, the damage done to the Black psychology, where I have to be prepared to die every time I go out my door. That's too much damage. That's too much. And I'm speaking me, the individual, James Sanders Jr. That's too much damage, and it will have a bad effect on so many different ways. There's that concept now known as weathering, and it's a very worthy concept that we all need to be aware of. And usually it's speaking of the external, but weathering also can deal with the mind, wearing down. But John, has anybody kept count on how many Asian victims we've had? I mean, are we? And you know the sad thing, no matter what number you give, it's going to be an undercount because many people don't report. What do you think about this, John?
I don't have a number for you, Senator, but I believe that there's been over 1,000% increase in official documented cases of attacks against Asian Americans just in New York alone. And I think that's very troubling.
What is triggering this, Mr. President? Mr. Wu, what is triggering this increase?
Well, it's a toxic environment. It isn't the pandemic, because John didn't cause the pandemic. I didn't cause the pandemic. It's people blaming us, not thinking they're going to catch a virus from us, but blaming us for that virus. And yeah, it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. It doesn't matter what your citizenship is. Someone who's going to commit a crime like this, they don't pause and say, oh, may I check your passport? So we see people, they're not Chinese, they're Korean, they're Burmese. In Los Angeles, there was a lady who was Chicana. She was Mexican-American, beaten, sent to the hospital by someone using slurs, the one that you know for people who are Chinese, even though she's Mexican American. And many of the people being attacked now, a bunch of them are elderly women and men being targeted because they're vulnerable. But some of these folks are native born. They're second, third, fourth, fifth generation. Now, don't get me wrong. It wouldn't be right if you went and found someone who was a Chinese foreigner or a recent arrival. That's not right either. But this is how prejudice works. And I used to hear it all the time. You all look the same, right? So it doesn't matter really whether you just got here or whether your family's been around for 5, 6 generations or you served in the U.S. military. You're still going to hear the go back to where you came from, which could be Chinatown in New York City.
Yes, or a block from your house, for that matter. It's just the logic of racism. It's sick. You're delving into madness. Now, how much of this, John? Let me pick on you. How much of this is the insane being influenced by the insaner? I'm talking President Trump. In fact, I won't pick on you, sir. I got a new person to pick on. I've got the head of the anti-Asian brutality. In fact, I'll let you, Lieutenant, explain your own, Lieutenant Inspector. Why don't you introduce yourself and say what is the task force that you're in charge of? And then I'm going to really want you to explain why are we here? What is propelling the madness? Sir, please jump right on in there. No mercy.
Sorry, I got here a little late. Just come back from a trip, so I apologize. I'm Inspector Ng with the Asian Hate Crime Task Force. The Asian Hate Crime Task Force was formed just about a year ago when, under the direction of Deputy Inspector Liu, who recently retired from the police department, that we realized there's a trend. There was a trend of COVID-related incidents targeting Asian American back in 2020. So the trends continue in 2020, and Inspector Liu had an idea of why don't we put, some Asian American investigators to handle these cases, that we speak the language, we speak the dialect, we know the culture. So there's less cultural differences when Asian Americans try to come forward. And we also see some people reluctant to report not just hate crime, but any incidents. They realize that, coming to the police stations, it's the hassle of, especially hate crime. Hate crime, you got to go through a process of interviews. You walk into the police station, you got interviewed by police officers who initially started the report. And then when, let's say the right questions being asked, that, all right, now the officer is going to kick it up a notch to a supervisor, a sergeant, a lieutenant at the desk. So when it's being reviewed by the lieutenant or the sergeant, it goes to the captain. The captain said, all right, this is a possible bias. We'll take the complaint. And then the captain in returns called the hate crime task force. So this is a multiple layer of process that it's difficult for a victim, especially a victim of hate crime, that they have to go through this traumatic experience again. So Inspector Liu formed a task force together with 25 detective Asian descent. They speak 11 languages and dialects, from Korean, from Tagalog, which is a Filipino language, and different types of dialects in Chinese. So that's how the task force was formed. So going forward in 2021, as of, I think, 2 days ago, I just walked into the office, there were 72 incidents. 72. One is too many. So 72
for this year.
For this year so far. Only into, not even May yet. So, Asian-related hate crime takes up majority of the hate crime in 2021 by far. We see in 5 different boroughs, we see that's tremendous increase. 5 different boroughs, not particularly Manhattan. People think that they all happen in Manhattan, but no, it's all 5 boroughs, ranging from property damage to attempted murders. It's a serious problem that I think as a New Yorker, we need to help one another, not just Asian American, but whether you're white, black, Hispanic, we need to come in as one and then help the situations as New Yorkers. I took over this position about a month and a half ago. As you can see, I haven't gotten any sleep, that's for sure. But to ensure that, we get the words out, we ensure that Asian American victims come forward. If John is here, John's Asian American, and I think Asian American, a lot of times that we feel that when something bad happens, we blame ourselves. We blame ourselves. If you're a victim of a robbery, we blame ourselves. We should not have taken the subway at 11 o'clock at night. We should not left, my expensive watches at home when I got burglarized. So we're trying to change the culture of Asian American to be more active, to be coming forward, to report any crimes. I think it's been like that for a while. I think also that hate crime, bias incidents, targeting Asian Americans have been going on for quite some time, but Asian Americans tend to be reluctant to come forward and report these incidents. So we don't conduct the preliminary investigations. The Hate Crime Task Force does, and we assist them in every other ways that we could. So if there's a victim that doesn't speak English, we send one of the detectives to go to the location. And if they run into situations where they have hard time getting videos and other forensic incidents, we also assist the Hate Crime Task Force in obtaining the evidence. We have done tremendous work of community outreach. I actually putting out a series of self-defense classes in the month of May. I just put out one for this Sunday, and it's overwhelming people signing up. So I think we got a lot of work to be done, but we're going to the right direction.
Mm-hmm. I was speaking to, and this is for both, and I'll let you go first, John, and then perhaps the inspector, if he cares, to weigh in. I was speaking to some African-American leaders, and we were noticing the horrifying trend that many of these attacks have been African-American on Asia. It's a horrifying thing. And we were trying to figure out the best way to show solidarity, but to also speak out against this, to let everyone know far and wide that this is not our way. This is absolutely not our way. That if we have problems with a system, we should take it up with a system. That it is cowardly to attack, of all people, the elderly, and then you hit them from behind. My God, how cowardly can we get? This is absolutely not our way. John, we'll start with you. How can African-American leaders and the community, for that matter, A, show more solidarity, and B, speak out?
So, Senator Sanders, before I answer that question, I just want to push back on something that the inspector said, that there is a sense that Asian Americans don't speak out, but I believe many of us have spoken out. And when we do report crimes of hate, the NYPD oftentimes misclassifies these incidents. I believe in 2020, all of last year, the NYPD only classified 4 attacks against Asian Americans as being anti-Asian hate crimes, which is, I think we could all agree that's a severe undercount of what actually happened. And so when we do speak up and when Asian Americans do go to the police and we're not taken seriously, I think that provides a disincentive for Asian Americans to actually come forward and report these crimes. Now, addressing your point, Senator Sanders, I think we have to look at differentiate between what is the individual act and what is the systemic act here.
Okay.
When you are, as you as an African American, when you are being attacked by a police officer, ultimately it doesn't matter what the color of that police officer is, whether the police officer white, Asian, or black. You're being targeted because you're African American. You're being targeted because we live in a country where Black lives don't matter and are not prioritized, and you are being scapegoated or blamed for social ills, regardless of your what you have done in your own life. And so I think that's the real issue here, that the victims are Asian Americans. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if the perpetrators are white, black, or even Asian. What's happening is that these people are acting within a white supremacist system.
Yes.
They are being told by our leaders and our political system, our media, our educational system, that Asian Americans are perpetual foreigners, that we don't belong here, that we are the source of many diseases. Like Councilwoman Julia Harrison, we are the perpetrators of all the problems in her district when she was a council member. So I think we should be focusing on the fact that certain groups in our society are being scapegoated and targeted, rather than focus solely on the color of the perpetrator. Because ultimately, and I think you said this before, Senator, who actually wins in this type of scenario? I would say white supremacy wins in this type of scenario, right? It's the people like Trump, it's the people in Congress and the millionaires who control our society that win when people of color are divided and fighting amongst ourselves.
Well put, sir. Well put. Inspector Ng, would you care to weigh in, or we can go to another question?
We can go to another question.
Okay. Now, which borough, Inspector, has the most attacks? Which borough has the most attacks so far, to your knowledge?
Manhattan, definitely Manhattan.
Okay. I mean, not okay, but I'm, as a Queens guy, I want to make sure that we stop this stuff in Queens, that the turnaround begins here, that where it started is important. I agree with you, Mr. Chow, that the problem is originating at different places. That for more than 4 years, we have had a barrage of racist thinking coming from the White House and other places, which have legitimized all kinds of stuff and have made people feel comfortable saying things that years ago they would be chased out of every decent person would have looked down on them. But now this rock has been overturned and everything has crawled out from under the rock. And among the beasties that have crawled out is this heightened anti-Asian madness. First you, John, then the inspector. How do we stop this stuff? How do we stop it? Okay, it's here, where it came from. remain. We can argue, but it's here. How do we stop it?
Sure. So Senator Sanders, I think the easy thing for any politician to do is to call for more police. And many people in Flushing have done that. The immediate knee-jerk reaction is we need to hire more police officers. We need more police officers on the streets. I believe New York City actually has the highest number of police officers per capita than any other major city in the United States, probably in the entire world. You can hire an additional 40,000 police officers. That's not going to stop anyone from getting hurt or attacked by these insane people on our streets. Police officers are ultimately crime fighters. They are not going to be solving the racism and the gender violence at the root of these attacks. We have to come together as a community. As President Wu had mentioned earlier, I think education is key. We need to better understand each other's histories and cultures and build solidarity to understand what have African Americans experienced, what have Latino migrants experienced, what have Asian Americans experienced through the building of the transnational railroad, the internment of Japanese Americans, the Chinese Exclusion Acts. These are all acts of violence perpetrated by the states against our community. So I think we have a lot more in common with African Americans and Latinos than maybe someone like Trump, who also happens to be from Queens as well. And, I think the insidiousness of white supremacy is that even if we consciously don't want to be whites, that's the ultimate goal of a white supremacist society, is to have the privileges of white people, of white men specifically. And so this may be kind of a non sequitur, but I did notice during the Persian Gulf War, when you had people like Colin Powell arguing for war against the Iraqis and people in the Middle East, even if it meant millions of people dying, I think his point was to say African Americans are patriots. We're going to do what the commander-in-chief tells us to do. And there was a lot of patriotic feeling that if we could only be more patriotic and prove ourselves, that they will treat us like white people. And I think that's also what's going on now. African Americans experience extreme forms of racism. So what do you have to lose if you can scapegoat and beat down someone else who you feel is less than you, right? Isn't that the whole illness of racism, is that you get to step on other people below you?
That is as American as apple pie. It's as a historian, I can't. It's what you're saying is historical. Inspector, how do we combat this? How do we stop this? You're on mute, sir.
I think, if you look at some of the arrests that we made, quite a few of those have mental history.
Yes.
For sure. That we look at the rap sheets. We look at how many times the ambulance go to the house. We look at how many times that they seek medical treatment for mental illnesses. I think we have to take a very close look into this particular area as to what kind of help these mental patients. And I'm not saying that's the driving force of this incident, but that's one of the common denominator that I see in these hate crime incidents. Should a person that committed a serious crime be out on the street again? And that's something that we have to look at also, that as you know, the bail reform changes, that not a lot of people get incarcerated these days. So I think that's another common factors, or one of the factors, that when he or she knows, when I commit a certain crime, I will not get remanded, I will not go to jail. Why not do it? There's no consequences. I think that's another reason as well.
Worthy points, sir. I may on another day take somewhat of an issue with you on bail reform. However, let us all say that if a person does the crime, then they should do the time. That if a person does these things, they should do the time. Let me go into the issue of mental illness for a moment. Your point is what I'm seeing also, Inspector, that many of these folk are mentally ill. Now, I'm going to join it with John's point and say that that racism as a whole is, I would argue, a mental illness. And anybody who gets into this is driving themselves madder and madder and madder.
Absolutely.
But it might be more attractive to those who are borderline, those who are already mentally ill may find the appeal of racism easier. Now I'm way out of my league and into studies on alienation and other things that are very worthy to study. But I'm out of my league, and I concede that that I mean, just like this QAnon stuff, I would argue to believe in this, you've already got to be on a slippery slope. Or when it comes to reality, you already got to not have the strongest grasp of reality if you already accept this QAnon stuff. And then to go a step further and hear the siren call of racism, where the illness, this so-called Chinese virus, we heard this foolishness. These are dog whistles and code words saying that this is where it came from. These are the folk that it came from, and anything done to these guys is seemingly okay and arguably patriotic. And we've got to change that narrative. Am I reading this one wrong, John?
I think you're reading this correctly, that, mental illness is a spectrum.
Yes.
All of us are susceptible to the siren call of racism, as you say, and we all have to be vigilant and inoculate ourselves through study, through relationship building, through mutual aid and support. When I go out and volunteer at my local food pantry, I don't ask people what is their ethnicity or their backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
They're there because they're hungry, they need help. They are my neighbor, my brother's keeper. I help them because I believe in what New York City stands for. I believe that I believe in what America stands for. And through these simple acts of kindness, I am manifesting what I believe is the American dream of supporting each other and helping each other. I think oftentimes, if I can, deviate into a critique of capitalism, capitalism preaches that we must compete against each other, we must tear each other down. And I believe in a racist society, that is manifested in taking down and other ethnic groups, other racial groups, in order for us to move ahead. I don't know if you remember this, but there's a candidate for Congress in Texas, Sari Kim.
Oh, yes.
And she had the audacity to say that Chinese people were to blame for the virus, and that she supported Trump's statement on that point, and that because she's Korean American, she gets she gets to say those things, and she has immunity to say those things. And I wholeheartedly disagree. In fact, as a Korean American, I repudiate her remarks. No Asian American has the right to blame another Asian American group and scapegoat people just because you're Asian American. In the same way that I don't think Black people should have, a free pass to say the N-word just because you're Black.
Mm. I agree with you. I think that ignorance is one common denominator also, and that those who, as a historian, the N-word absolutely galls me, because there's no way that you could make a word with such a soiled, sordid history into something positive. You can't. You're ignoring history if you do that. You're either ignorant to it or you're blind. Your choice of that woman in Texas is a very good one, because you can have a self-hating mindset no matter what you are.
Yes.
And you, in this society, if you drink the Kool-Aid of racism, you can hate yourself and try to be the other, in this sense, white, and you could try all you wish. You could deny yourself and put everybody like you down all you wish. It's not going to work. And we need to find a new way. What is the new way, Inspector? How can the community stand up? Let me say one more thing before I go to you, sir. The idea that people will stand by and not intercede is dangerous for society as a whole. Yell, scream, do something, jump up and down, do something. But that case, all the more horrifying in Manhattan, where you had several people watching a gentleman beat down, who happens to be an Asian man, but it doesn't matter. Why are we not interceding more, Inspector, or is intercession the right way?
I think, like you said, no one should be watching. No one should be taking no actions when, whether that person is white, Black, Hispanics being attacked for whatever reason. We see a lot of these videos that, all they do, the bystander do is videotaping. It's videotaping as we're watching a movie, as there's a, filming going on the street of New York City. That has to change. We need to stand together, like I said before, as one New Yorker, that when any incidents happen, not just hate crime, but of robberies, if we were living in a smaller town, this would have been a different scenario, that everyone knows each other, that when there's a problem happens, we all take actions. And just because we don't know the person that's standing next to you doesn't mean that we're just going to stand there and watch what's going on. Like you said, a 61-year-old Filipino woman getting beat up. And as you can see on the video, that we have a couple of people that's standing around and did absolutely nothing to help. So John just signed in. Hello, John. So I think, we have to urge the unity of our community to ensure that overall crime, or any crime, not just hate crime, that we should take immediate action to stop it.
Well put. We have been joined, of course, by my esteemed senator and my colleague and friend, John Liu, who has been with me, or me with him, for as long as we have traversed this political stuff. Now, I took some positions, John, as I usually do. And one of the positions that I'm trying to figure out, I was speaking to some Black leaders, and we were trying to figure out, how do we go public more in a straight out appeal to Black folk, to say that, my friends, this is just not our way. This is not our history. It does not aid us. This is not We should attack the system, injustice, if you wish, but these are individuals, and heck, with your luck, you're hitting your biggest supporters. You don't know who these guys are. So we're trying to figure out how to make such an appeal, but is the appeal in one sense necessary? Because most of the people doing the attacking seem to be insane. And would the appeal be useful? But if they have had an appeal that had told them that it's okay to hit these guys, then there needs to be a counter to that. Your thoughts on all of this thinking, sir?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I just want to confirm, because we're on this Zoom meeting right now, but this is a podcast, right?
This is a podcast.
So nobody can see us.
No one at this moment. No one is watching except.
That's good, because I have a face made for podcasts, and I want to thank you for inviting me on this program. I know we have other people, especially Inspector Ng, who just spoke. So I apologize that I didn't get the full context of our conversation, but I imagine that it's a conversation similar to what we've been having for the better part of a year now, because the Asian American community in particular has been faced with a secondary virus, that of bigotry and hate. And it's just, it really came to a crescendo in the last several weeks with the killing spree in Atlanta. And even then, I thought that could possibly be the culmination, but we've still seen more horrific videos that have surfaced after that. Your question of how do we reach out to the community to say this is not us or this is not anybody, I first want to thank you and many of our African American brothers and sisters in government and in elective office. In many ways, African American electeds stepped up a year ago when this was first starting to hit our community, and had many press conferences and rallies to decry, to denounce the anti-Asian hate that was happening. Secondly, many of these videos, you see on social media, people posting, oh, this must be the white supremacists at it again. And of course, they're dripping with sarcasm because the video ostensibly shows a Black person committing the attacks. Number one, I want to say outright that I don't think there's a clear pattern there, that people have been attacking Asian Americans all throughout the country, and it's not specific to any one race more so than any other. So it's unfortunately a spate of attacks that are rooted in racism. I have no doubt about that, that there is anti-Asian hate. Some of the instances could have been perpetuated by people who have emotional disturbance issues, and that's something that I think our law enforcement and police departments need to be better equipped to deal with, and that's on us in government to provide those resources and the proper training so that we know how to respond to what the police have historically called emotionally disturbed persons. That's maybe one element of it, but I think the broader problem is that COVID-19 it's been fearsome, right? Millions of people have died, hundreds of thousands in this country, and tens of thousands of fellow New Yorkers have died from this dreaded virus. And the economy has been down in the pits. So many people have lost their jobs, their economic opportunity, even where they live is in peril. And so all of this uncertainty, the economic pain, the pain of losing loved ones, it has created a situation where people are distraught. They don't know exactly how to deal with this virus. And that ignorance always demands some kind of answer or somebody to blame. And ever since the beginning of our history in this country, Asian Americans have long been scapegoats for anything that might go wrong. And that combined with the former so-called president who kept calling this the China virus or the Kung flu, which by now they have become part of the modern day lexicon of anti-Asian slurs. That, you know, people needing to blame somebody and blaming Asian Americans for COVID-19, that really has escalated this onslaught of anti-Asian hate. And the real way to deal with that, in my opinion, is it's not about just getting more cops on the street or increasing the penalties for what is considered a hate crime. In order to address the underlying root problems of ignorance and fear, is by education. We want to get our community to a point where, you know, hopefully the police doesn't have to be involved so much. And the only way to do that is by educating people about the accomplishments as well as the struggles of the Asian American community here in New York and beyond. Senator Sanders, you know that I have a bill in the legislature that calls for the state education department to promulgate materials and curriculum that will finally educate our kids about the Asian American history. I mean, you know, when I was in high school, which like you, was a long time ago.
Speak for yourself, sir. I just got out yesterday.
one lousy paragraph about Asian Americans in an entire 2-inch textbook of American history. And it just talked about the railroads and how we helped build them. And nothing else. And now some of the textbooks that are still being used have not expanded on that at all. And I know, I'm very well aware that this is an issue that the African American community has been fighting for a very long time too. The fact that African American history is American history, but you certainly wouldn't know that from the textbooks that are still being used today, almost all of which have been written by white authors, and therefore history is always viewed through certain lenses by our school children. So we need to understand that racism and hatred are rooted in ignorance.
Yes.
But we're not going to ever deal with that root cause of ignorance by having more law enforcement and greater penalties. We need to get at the education. And as great a job as most of our New York's finest, including my friend Tommy Ng here, they are out there, but it's our job in government and the larger society to get our communities to a point where we don't need to be calling the police, because these attacks are not happening in the first place, because people better appreciate Asian Americans and African Americans as fellow human beings. You look at some of these attacks, it's almost as if the Asian victim is not a fellow human being. The viciousness with which these attacks are being carried out. I mean, and you asked what can African American leaders and all leaders do? You having this podcast is already a big step. Just trying to get the information out there, the experience that we have, the struggles that we continue to have as Asian Americans, as African Americans, and drawing parallels and finding commonalities, as opposed to always, dwelling on the differences.
Well put. Now we're going to have you guys give your last words here. We're going to start with the inspector, go to Mr. Choe, and then end with you, Senator Liu. So much has been said here. Well, I'll let you guys speak, and then I will give a benediction to us all, I guess. Inspector, I'm so glad that you came on and made time today. Inspector, you'll unmute yourself and you can give your last words on this subject.
Once again, thanks for having me here. Senator Liu hit it right on the nail that education is paramount. I think when I was in high school, that, Asian American history was never taught as the main subject. That, no one really know it. It's all we know was that, what's Chinese New Year's, but no one talk about the history of Asian Americans, that how we came to this country, how we struggle in America, that we're part of society, we're part of the community as well. That many of Asian American, they work hard, and we should be look at as just like everyone else, white, black, and Hispanic, that we're part of the American dream, that, that's what we come here for. At the same time, I urge all the Asian American not to be afraid to go on the street. No one should be afraid of walking down on the street, taking a train, going to work, just because you're Asian American. You're afraid of getting attacked just because the color of your skin. We want to emphasize that every report, that every incident we investigate, we utilize every single resources, 35,000 police officers that will work together and solve the crime.
Well put, sir. Mr. Choe.
Senator, thank you so much. Before I answer your regarding your concluding remarks, I just want to echo what the Senator Liu just mentioned, that police are not the answer. Greater education and solidarity is the real answer. I'm specifically referring to the recent law that was passed in Congress, sponsored by Grace Meng, House Resolution 151. It put the onus of addressing this issue on expanding law enforcement and the racist carceral state. And I just want to say, myself personally, I don't want to use the pain of anti-Asian hate to justify more persecution of our Black and brown brothers. And I say not in our name. My concluding remark is to say that, yes, we must be vigilant, and we must condemn these visible forms of violence against our community. But I ask you, I plead with you to also consider the invisible forms of anti-Asian violence. Asian Americans are the fastest growing community in poverty in New York City. I see on the streets of Flushing, where I live and work, thousands of Asian Americans lining up for food just because they're hungry, they're jobless, they're being evicted, they don't have access to basic health care. That's also a form of violence against Asian Americans, and we cannot let the states, New York City, Albany, or the federal government off the hook in terms of the invisible forms of violence against Asian Americans in New York.
Well put, brother Senator.
Well, once again, I really appreciate you putting this program together. There are two terms that Asian Americans hold dear, and not in a positive way. One term is perpetual foreigner. We feel like we're perpetual foreigners. It's called the perpetual foreigner syndrome. It's like, people cannot conceive of Asians being real Americans, and that we're always made to feel like foreigners. So people ask me, where are you from? I say, I'm from Flushing. And their immediate response is always, no, where are you really from? Or, I'm gonna be the only person, and I know Tommy and John Choe can identify with this also. We're in the only person in a big room of other people where somebody comes up to us and says, you speak English really well. I mean, this is, it's funny, but it actually happens. And these are like things that really get under our skins. They really piss us off when people say those things to us, even though they seem to be compliments. And so the perpetual foreigner syndrome is something that we need to eradicate. The only way we're going to eradicate that is by teaching our school kids that, hey, Asian Americans have been in this country, in the United States, for 150 years with lots of accomplishments as well as struggles along the way. And then the second term that we often allude to is the term model minority, or more specifically, model minority myth. The model minority basically says, hey, look at these Asians, you know, they do well in school, they have lots of money, they don't need any help whatsoever, right? On the surface, it sounds like some kind of compliment, but it is insidious. It's insidious because, number one, it cuts Asian American communities, which are among the poorest and the lowest income, notwithstanding the stereotypes out there, right? So it perpetuates a false stereotype, cuts the Asian American community off from government resources and the recognition that, you know what, we need support also. And even worse than that, it drives a wedge between the Asian American community and the African American and Latinx and other BIPOC communities. So, I go back to when you and I first served in the city council, James, January 2002. That was the time when we renamed the Black and Hispanic caucus in the city council to the Black, Latino, and Asian caucus. For the very first time, really officially recognizing that the Asian American community is part of the community of color, and that we have a lot more in common than we have in difference. So kudos to you. You know, I still think that caucus needs to be renamed more fairly. Remember, we had many discussions about this. All right, Black, Latino, and Asian caucus. It should, if it was really fair, it would be in alphabetical order. But you never supported me on that, James.
Alphabetical order, African American. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry. I just wanted to.
I really appreciate you having this. This was a great discussion. Let's do a part 2 sometime soon.
I look forward to it. I look forward. First, I got to give first, let me thank my guest for really being, you heard it here first, my friends. Nobody's hiding. There's no sloppy thinking here. We are as clear as we can be. Now, let me give them a disclaimer. My following words are for me and myself alone. They have not agreed. They have not vetted none of this stuff. They neither agree nor disagree. Neither is the state Senate or any other place. As a Marine, I really am offended by the cowardly nature of these attacks. To attack the elderly, that is unmanly. To attack, and then you're going to attack them from behind. What kind of wimp? What kind of weasel are you? You got to be insane. You that's just so unmanly. If you really want to be manly, why don't you go fight the Proud Boys? They like that type of stuff. Go find them, and they can give you a good, they can tell you about white supremacy. How's that? They will educate you, or you can educate them on whatever power you want to be on any given day. I don't encourage any of that, but I do say attacking the elderly, attacking the women, attacking from behind, attacking people you don't know and have no personal battle with is if you are saying stop it. This is not our way. This is not the way of the African Americans. When we have a problem with the system, we go straight up to the system. We are dealing straight up power to power instead of any of this other stuff. Now, I agree that there is ignorance and behind racism, but let's be clear, there's power behind racism. There are those who are using racism to pit people against one another and to profit from this madness, and we need to be clear about that. This is not to say that even within the groups, the communities of color, there are no differences. There are differences, things that we need to work out, things that we need to debate, questions of education and special education and all kinds of things, worthy conversations that we need to speak with ourselves about. But being exceptionally clear The way forward is through solidarity. The way forward is to make sure that we stand with folk who have a similar history, and we stand to be Americans all. As a historian, I can tell you of the Asians' contribution in World War II, incredible military units. We could just go on in these things. But the bottom line is, uh, the poet Langston Hughes again said it best. And he said, we want America to be America for everybody. And of course, as my friend John Choe would say, it's the mythical America that we're fighting for, the American dream. Let's do it that way. We want the American dream to be real for everybody. And you heard this at this podcast, which is called Let's Be Clear. It's an attempt to cut through fuzzy thinking, to say what really needs to be said, to find ways of understanding so that we can have solidarity. And my name is Senator James Sanders Jr., and we have been clear. I wish my friend John Choe great success in his endeavor. You should call me offline and let's talk some more. Inspector Ng, if I can be useful, you need to keep my name and number. You may find it useful on some future day. And if I can be useful, I don't mind. I will be consistent. Having said that, my friends, enjoy the rest of this day. Celebrate life with family and find some stranger and show some love. God bless you all.